Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this third session in the Open Educational Resources in RDM webinar series. I want to, before we get started, to let you know that this is an English session. There is live French interpretation, French translation for you, so you can access that using your toolbar at the bottom and opting in for the interpretation service. My name is Catherine DeVita. I'm the training coordinator with the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, and I will be one of your moderators and hosts today alongside Nick Rocklin and Jen Abel. This session is a behind-the-scenes look at the development of Athabasca University's asynchronous OER micro course on research data management, where Robyn, Stobbs, and Corinne Bossé will discuss their process and the decision-making, highlighting considerations for OER development, including partnership building, resourcing, technologies used, and ongoing project sustainability and assessment. So before we begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. So I would like to acknowledge that I am working from Montreal, situated on the unceded traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst the many First Nations. As we proceed with our webinar session today, it is with acknowledgement of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations and communities who have been harmed by colonial and non-ethical research, and of the data sovereignty and research priorities of these nations and communities. On behalf of the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, we commit to understanding and taking up our role in reducing harm and advancing reconciliation in research. The Alliance seeks to provide a welcoming, engaging, and safe community for everyone. Discriminatory language is not appropriate in any venue or platform. The Alliance does not tolerate harassment in any form, and harassment is understood as any behavior that threatens another person or group or produces an unsafe environment. It is now my pleasure to formally introduce you to today's panel, to today's presenters, excuse me. So Robyn Stobbs is with the University of Athabasca, the Athabasca University, excuse me, and is the research data management, the librarian. And we're also joined by Robyn Bossé, also with Athabasca University, who is a learning designer. We are also joined, as I mentioned, by Jen Abel with the University of Calgary and the co-chair of the National Training Expert Group. So Jen is also a research data management librarian. And then we're also joined by Nick Rocklin, who's an RDM specialist with University of British Columbia and also co-chair of the National Training Expert Group. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Robyn and to Corinne, and they'll take it from here.
Thank you all for coming. As Catherine mentioned, I'm Robyn Stobbs, and I'm here presenting with my colleague Corinne, and we are both at Athabasca University. So I'm just going to double check here that my slides are advancing properly. There we go. So to start off today, we're talking about the micro course in research data management we created at our institution. And I'm just going to very briefly touch on the course, and then Corinne's going to dive into a little bit about our context as an institution and our audience. So the course itself, I've got a screenshot here from the webpage entry for the course. It's hosted on the PowerEd platform, which is a separate body at our institution that creates and hosts courses and micro courses. And that was very useful for us to have access to that platform. So that's the platform it's on. That's why it says PowerEd at the top. The course itself is openly licensed and openly available. However, because the platform itself requires a login, And the access code to get in for free is graduate free. So we will make sure to include those details in the chat box here as well. So diving a little more into what that course is, it's intended as an introduction to research data management. It's 5 modules followed by a summative activity. And we have built small learning activities into each module. And so some of them are intended as content review and some of them are more active learning opportunities. And those opportunities are put into what we call the learning journal that is intended to scaffold students towards creating a data management plan. And if someone is taking the course who maybe doesn't have a project in mind, but still wants to learn about research data management, we also tried to word the activities in a way that gave them examples or other scenarios they could use to complete the activities. So I'll turn it over to Corinne here to give a little bit more information about our context.
Hi everyone, as Robyn mentioned, I'm Corinne Bossé. I'm a learning designer with the Faculty of Graduate Studies. And it's kind of fitting that I'm talking about the context because my introduction to AU was as an intern many moons ago when I was studying distance education. And one of the reasons is that AU is a pioneer in distance education. I think the pioneer in distance education within the country. It's also an open university. So we have an open mandate access for students. In terms of the status, we are a research public university with graduate programs. Just to give you a context, we do have 2 doctoral programs, one in business and one in, of course, open distance education, digital education. We have 7 master's degree programs and 13 graduate programs and certificates. In terms of numbers, it fluctuates a lot. I mean, the full-time students is around 11,000 students, but really, I would say the more actual numbers, counting the number of part-time students that we have, the university overall has over 40,000 students. And the graduate programs, the students vary as well. So it can go anywhere between over 5,000 to, reaching sometime closer to 10, depending on the years that we're counting. And that is what I wanted to mention in terms of the institutional context. So just to give you a flair for those of you who are not familiar with Athabasca University and its mandate and the fact that we are a completely online university as well. And that's worth noting. Situated, of course, in Alberta. In terms of the context for the course itself, the main audience that we wanted to target, so as I mentioned, I'm part of the Faculty of Graduate Studies, so that was really the target audience, but we had a spectrum of people to take into account. Of course, the research assistants are kind of like the obvious ones in terms of being involved in research, but also looking at the population of the graduate students that we serve. We have a lot of students who would be considered mature students in other traditional universities. We have a lot of people also that are practitioners and they come into the graduate studies to upskills basically, or to consolidate their credentials. So we don't have only the typical sort of graduate students who are doing straight, from the master's to the research, from the bachelor's to the research and, either at the master's or doctoral levels. We have a lot of practitioners coming back to consolidate their credentials, basically. We also have researchers at large in terms of, junior researchers to a range of experienced researchers who needed to kind of update their knowledge around research data management practices as it's becoming more formalized nationally and institutionally. And as I mentioned, the practitioners were really important. So we really needed to craft a course that could address the needs of all these different components of the graduate student population within AU and beyond, of course. So we wanted to have a mix of practical and as well as foundational principles around RDM. And we'll delve into a little bit more into that. Robyn is also going to mention a little bit more about the broader access that we wanted this course to have beyond the context of AU.
Yes, so in thinking about developing the course, we were developing it for our context, but also wanted to maximize its reuse potential. And that was where creating it as an OER came in for us. We wanted to be able to both use and rely on resources such as those that expert groups through Portage and now the Alliance put out, as contribute back to the community while using resources that others had created. So that was a key goal for us, and part of why we went forward with trying to openly license the output when we were done. I'm just going to make the slide advance a little here. There we go. So I'm going to touch a bit more on our development process. And it's to start that off, I've got a timeline here. And I want to emphasize this wasn't a fast process to put this together. So we had our initial meetings between Corinne and I and the Dean of FGS in April of 2021, talking about why we thought this was an important undertaking, knowing that the tri-agency policy was new. We wanted to ensure people had an ability to get the skills in RDM that they might need. And so we started that very early on, and it took us a while to move through proof of concept, getting appropriate approvals and budget, onboarding additional team members like a designer to help us, bringing in editing, and then further steps beyond that. So we're going to walk through all of this going forward. We just wanted to begin with this timeline here, and we'll bring it up again a little later in the presentation itself. And I'll note here, this cursor should show up on screen, that we are in the ongoing assessment phase at this point and are thinking about continuing aspects of the project.
So in order for this course to see the day, basically, initially, it really started as a synergy of different stakeholders within the institution. The first thing was really to build partnerships. So of course, you know, Robyn is the expert here, but before that, even within the Faculty of Graduate Studies, this is also, it's not an isolate course. It's also part of a broader strategy in terms of offering professional development to our graduate students. This is a demand both institutionally and even at the national level. If you attended the Canadian Association of Graduate Studies and one of its affiliates, which is the graduate and postdoctoral development network, professional development has been identified as a key factor to add value to graduate experience. So part of a bigger goal when we're looking at what kind of activities we would develop to support our graduate students, we're looking at a set of core competencies that we wanted to support, research, of course, being an obvious one, and to offer this as a complementary offering to our students, as a way to also be a little bit more nimble in terms of sometimes priorities that are emerging. For instance, research data management. Of course, you know, data management has been touched in different courses within the traditional curriculum, but we thought that given that this was emerging as a priority, both nationally as well as institutionally, we needed to offer something a little bit more up-to-date and also sort of like knowledgeable, tapping and leveraging the knowledge that we had at home in terms of research data management. So that's very clear in terms of why you know, Faculty of Graduate Studies participated. That was not just from one unit, but multiple units came together. In terms of also raising the knowledge base of our graduate students, because we do have them coming from different programs. And as I mentioned earlier, we have an open mandate. So our students are at different points in their graduate studies, in their research journey, even in their university journey. So we needed to have something as well for sort of a beyond the course where you know, the scrutiny of the faculty would not be so keen, where students could go and feel comfortable going and getting some of the skills that they would need to complement their own graduate journey. And as well, we tapped into the fact that I'm a learning designer. So I've been at this for, you know, over 20 years now. And part of that meant sort of like bridging sort of the SME expertise with also kind of like the overall overseeing the overall design of the course, and as well as kind of tapping into what kind of needs we would need for graduate students and all the spectrum also of graduate students that we would serve. We also beneficiated from a partnership with the research office, which of course was on board from the get-go in terms of participating into this research data management, because it feeds larger goals that Robyn will speak about a little bit more. It was also part of like growing the research culture, because we are a young research sort of institute, even though we've been around for more than 50 years as an institution, but within the graduate space, a little bit younger in terms of years. and also to support capacity building. We're a small institution, so we really needed to benefit from partnerships with other units in order to really secure the resources that we need. And Robyn will be able to talk with the vital, of course, partnership of the library and scholarly resource unit, without which we wouldn't have the expertise to had build this course. So Robyn, over to you in terms of the very fruitful partnership that we've had ongoing, basically partnership with the library.
Thanks, Corinne. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight here that my position was new to our institution in June of 2020, and we started this project in April of 2021. So being able to work with Corinne and FGS and get that better understanding of our graduate student population is really important. The library had previously partnered with FGS on other projects. There's ongoing and good relationship there that was really good that we were able to bring into this project. The library had done some asynchronous resource creation itself, but we wanted to really make sure that this was somewhere where our graduate students would see it. Our own practices brought in a lot of value for openness and sharing and allowed us to bring that drive to how can we make openly license this and ensure we can have maximum reusability here. And the flip side of my role, and part of why it was so new, was it was also to be thinking about our research data management strategy at the institution itself. So we were able to incorporate this project into our institutional strategy thinking and about how this might move our own strategy forward as an institution as we go. So that was really useful there and was also a tie with the research office and research center. Here. Corinne's going to get into a little more detail now about the proof of concept and our next steps going forward. We had a partnership, but how did we actually get additional support to make this come into being?
Yes, so sort of like tapping into the different experiences of moving projects along within institutions, and especially in an area where that was more or less familiar depending on the audience that we were talking about. We knew that this was a priority. We knew we wanted to support. And one of the strategy that I presented to Robyn, as well as my own department, was to create a proof of concept before people committed to resources. And also part of it was strategically enabled in order to secure even funding down the line, people needed to have a taste of what it is. And this is where also I pulled from my kind of learning design hat, even though, you know, professional development has been part of my main portfolio for the past number of years. But I knew that we needed to have a proof of concept for people to be able to visualize what it looked like. And also it's good design practice to sort of like test our ideas before we go full on and invest in any kind of resources into it. So the goals are really strategic in terms of securing funding from a design perspective, to sort of like have the broad stroke of what it would look like or could look like, and to articulate those ideas. And so Robyn and I had many sessions in terms of coming together, discussing the different aspects of the course from a design perspective, and as well as the broader goal of developing the skills development versus being compliant, because that was a concern that I had earlier on. Being an outsider from the research data management field, I was able to bring kind of that external view in terms of, okay, if you're not from an RDM field, you're not sort of like, this is not your you know, sort of your primary area. How would we approach this given the audience that we serve? And I know that there's a strong component of compliance within research data management, but very early on, as I mentioned, I had this discussion with Robyn where I was like, we need to emphasize the usefulness of this for your students, how it's going to enrich their skills development within the academic environment and beyond. That was very important. So that's what we try to make, you know, to bake this even into the proof of concept, not to make this too dry, not to make this too technical, but this to serve as a skills development for all the students that would be concerned, as well as the community of researchers that we serve. So really, we created a prototype. If you're familiar with the design strategies, that's the way to go in terms of not committing. So we used a software to do that. And I would say more than the software, the conversation around articulating the goals was important. And having some visuals was important as well in terms of, you know, helping us thinking through. And then the proof of concept, also the strategic goal of that, beyond the design kind of discussion with Robyn at the micro level, I would say at the macro level, we were able to present that proof of concept to key stakeholders within FGS, the Faculty of Graduate Studies, of course, the leaders, in order to show them this is what it could look like. They were already on board, but it was kind of a nice reinforcement for them as they were going to talk with other members with the universities. It was also important for the research office to kind of have an idea of what we were developing in terms of, for them as well, to visualize what that could look like and their contribution to it. And also within the Faculty of Graduate Studies Council, this is where we also needed to present the project, and having a proof of concept as opposed to just talking was key in terms of visualizing again what we wanted to achieve and why it was important. So having a prototype with us was really key when we did the presentation at FGS Council, and we were able to gain some traction there and momentum going forward. And now Robyn is going to sort of like mention and present what it looked like in terms of the course itself, beyond the proof of concepts, once we were able to gain all the approval from the FGS Council, basically to go ahead with this and secure the support.
Thanks, Corinne. So I'm going to leave it on this slide for a second, and I've got some screenshots of our proof of concept development process to speak to here. So the image on this particular slide is from Storyline, but it was the Articulate Storyline 360 software. But it was, this particular screenshot is from very early on in our process. This file actually didn't move much beyond this. And it was part of that initial discussion process of what do we need to be able to present to get additional approvals here? And one of the things Corinne had asked me to develop was a one-pager at the very start. And this was the next step after a written one-pager of who's our audience, what type of topics are we covering, what's the point of doing this? This was the outline of, okay, these are some of what we think our initial topics and modules should be. Moving on from that, for the proof of concept itself, we focused in on the initial module, so the very, very introductory content. And we started out with actually just written content in Word and then figuring out how we might use the software. The library already had a license to this software, which is largely why we used it. I started out in Storyline and found it to be a bit beyond, my first time using Storyline, a bit beyond what I would be able to do at a reasonable timeline if I wasn't going to have to also train up in using all of the software, figuring out how to do all of the editing within it. So from there, that's the image on the left is from one of the Storyline templates we had tried. On the right, we moved the content into Articulate Rise, which is a much more user-friendly and intuitive to use. It's got a user interface, more limited options of what you can do, but also just way easier to get going and to get the proof of concept up and have something we could put on screen and give a link to at things like the FGS Council meeting Corinne mentioned. People could actually go in and take a look at the first module. What this whole process really demonstrated for us as well was that it would be helpful to have a designer doing some visual design and implementation on the team, so that Corinne and I could focus on our own areas of expertise, Corinne around the learning design and me on the subject content related to RDM, and have someone else implement some of these additional pieces. So from here, Corinne's going to get into some of the particularities around funding and how we work that out as well.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, having a proof of concept was really good in terms of even identifying some of those gaps in resources and skills that we would need to, have a project that would be reasonably presentable and accessible as well, and to develop some of the ideas that we discussed at the design stage. So the support we got from the FGS Council, as I mentioned, and also it helped sort of like the argument of within the faculty of graduate studies. Our dean was able to go and speak with his colleagues, the other deans of the other faculties, and secure funding from them. And he was able to refer to the link that we had for the proof of concept. So that was very useful for the deans to be able to see something concrete, and then to see that, yeah, it needed to support. So we needed the resources financially, as well, to support the extra resources that we need. Robyn just mentioned, we needed to have someone who had expertise in multimedia production and design and the visuals as well. So we were able to secure funding for that, thanks to the proof of concept. It helped. And the research office, which was already on board, but that was great in terms of for them to integrate this proof of concept within sort of the rationale for securing the funds. So basically our dean at the Faculty of Graduate Studies was able to collect all those funds from all the faculties, of course, contribute funds from our own faculties and the research office. We also were able to secure the contribution in kind, very much in kind, of Robyn, in terms of she was the SME, so the subject matter expert in terms of providing the RDM content, and as well as tapping into our colleagues to check, if she needed to, because as we said, we have a lot of complementary projects. So that was a great resource to have, not only Robyn, but also to be able to count on our colleagues if needed be, to tap into different areas within the course. And as well as the external designers that was, hired on a contract. And again, we leveraged the partnership that we had with PowerEd, which is a little bit sort of similar to a continuing education department. And so we're able to tap into their network to secure that external designer. And we were able to tap into our network within the faculties to secure an editor to really sort of proof edit basically at the end. So that was really important. All these elements help us going beyond the proof of concept to actually executing and developing the course that is actually available to for all of us to see. And I think, Robyn, it's up to you as well for the next, no, it's mine as well, in terms of the choice of platforms. So Robyn mentioned, and I mentioned as well, PowerEd. Part of it is, why did we choose the platform that we chose, as opposed to, choosing an open education resource platform right from the get-go? There were a lot of different goals for this. One, in terms of the fit for context, we do have a partnership with PowerEd in terms of developing a professional development courses for students for free. The portion, and they have a platform that was already available within the FGS faculty. We didn't have a platform per se. So given the partnership that we had with PowerEd, we would just took advantage basically and leverage the platform that they were using. And also using a learning management system. For those of you who are curious, it's the Brightspace D2L one that we used. And part of the advantages of using that is also giving the context of how this course was going to be delivered. We needed to have a learning management system that would be able to contain, to track the progress of our students, to be able also to track the activities that are going on. And also in terms of the delivery, having this platform asynchronously allowed for asynchronous delivery in terms of referring the students to one single point and not being lost in the weeds, and also providing a relatively safe environment as well for them to navigate this course. And also it happens to be, since this platform, as I mentioned, we used it for other professional development courses, it just made sense again to use it and not to reinvent the wheel. And also it was also part of the resource sort of a discussion in terms of, PowerEd was willing to basically let us use the platform for not a fee. So that was really important too, because whatever the platform that you use, you have to think about the maintenance issues. So having a partner that was able to do all of this for us, provide us the platform, and also allow us to have a professional development course live into it, and for this instance, a research data management, was very beneficial and useful. In terms also of the larger benefits of using the learning management system, as I mentioned, it was very useful to have a format like this to track the students' progress, and also to issue badges. So the platform allows us to issue badges for students once they complete the course, to acknowledge the efforts that they've done and the fact that they've done this course, and they could use this within their own resume building, for their own sort of professional development purposes, as well as, for internal and external reasons within their course, within their research projects, or even if they're going to apply for funding, whatever the use is. This is the benefit of using it at this level within our institution. It just made sense. But we did go beyond this, and Robyn will talk about sort of the OER strategy going forward as well. But this is what I wanted to mention in terms of why we chose what we have, is because it was available and it made sense for our context and our purposes of this course. And Robyn, I think it's up to you for the next in terms of going further in terms of the content development once we're able to secure the platform.
Yes, thanks, Corinne. So I'm going to give a kind of high level overview of how we did content development for this project, since we're focusing much more here on our kind of behind the scenes view of developing the OER versus the content itself. So briefly, as I mentioned before, there are 5 modules. We had an introduction to RDM, ethics and responsibilities, data documentation, data storage and backups, data deposit, all followed by a summative activity, which was creating a DMP. So the content itself was written by me in Microsoft Word, with Corinne and I reviewing it with the designer Anson, and highlighting where visual elements and learning activities would be inserted. So I do a first draft and say, I think something makes sense here. And Corinne would go, yeah, that sounds good. And then we chat with Anson more about how we might implement that in the platform, which types of things made sense. We worked very modularly. So one module of content at a time, which we would then transfer to Anson to play with on the platform. He would draft it and come back to us and we'd take a look. Once we had a few modules kind of in the queue, that was when we started working with the editor, reviewing the actual, the wording itself, kind of looking at APA formatting, just making sure that things were clear and that the wording was as concise as it should be. And then also, as we progressed along with the project, Corinne and I also met to discuss how we would incorporate perspectives of researchers into the course itself. So we met and had several discussions around, what should we ask them? What sort of questions? We came up with a list of questions, and then Corinne went out and actually interviewed the researchers, faculty members, and one research assistant that we were going to feature in the course. She did those interviews and then also selected portions based on how course content had ended up being laid out. So then selected portions that would go in to the modules themselves, and Anson then edited the footage, adding in names and positions and things like that. So, and just briefly here to talk about the visuals on screen. The one on the right is a GIF or GIF, depending how you want to pronounce that, of the research data lifecycle that Anson developed for us. That we used it was our main piece of visual that we wanted for beginning the course, that we returned to at the end of the course as well. And then the image on the left was one I created very roughly as I was trying to explain processes and thinking about, can you share your data? Do you have human participant data? This is a decision tree style of piece, which I then gave to Anson, and he turned into a couple of different options of how we might display that within the course, and came up with more of a, using what was built in with Rise, more of a slide style presentation where people would click the options and it would take them through. So that's just a kind of overview of what our process was and how the 3 of us worked together on ensuring everything came together into the modules for the course itself. And just to highlight here, I've brought the timeline back up again. So that content development was happening largely between April of 2022 and October of 2022. We already had the verbal content for module 1 before that, because that was what was the proof of concept. And just to highlight here, this was quite a long development process. There were important aspects to consider, including things like potential work stoppages. We're in a unionized environment and how that affected different members of the team differently. So there's a lot of things to consider coming in here. So we just wanted to highlight that again. So at this point in the presentation, we've finished our content development. We worked with the editor, and then got it loaded into the LMS. So that was again working with PowerEd to get that done. And Corinne here is going to now speak a bit to our pilot process.
Yes, so again, part of this course was really thought through in terms of, we're really intentional in terms of testing the ideas from the proof of concept to developing the course initially, and then the pilot. Even though it says December in terms of running the pilot itself, the thinking started earlier in the fall, in November, really, once the course was actually loaded into the LMS, and we had this whole design around, okay, we wanted to have students in it, knowing that this period would be sort of a low moment in terms of enrollment. We just went ahead because we just wanted to test basically the idea of the course. And so we issued with our partners invitations to our graduate students within the Athabasca. And then we also have a memorial university that is one of our partner, and we invited them to the project. So 45 enrolled in the course, and 21 did not log in after enrolling. 7 completed the entire course to earn a badge. And for us, those numbers are not really surprising in the professional development area. It's a lot of the times the attrition number is really high. People have interest, but for a number of reasons, they don't go through. But still, there was enough interest for people to know that it exists at that point. And also we were very conscious of the time, sort of like end of the session for a lot of the students, and then kind of like going into the holiday. But still, we were able to kind of like see that it was working. The pieces were together. We did use a pre and post survey, which we continue to use to collect data. And this is part of our strategy for all the courses that we have. And largely what we were able to garner was sort of like minor tweaks, but for people who did complete the survey, it was mostly positive in terms of the goals that we had for the course itself. So even though, we don't have a significant number here, but it was enough for us to say that we could go. And once the pilot was completed, we didn't close the course. We went into what I would say is a soft launch of the course. And we're still kind of like collecting the data. So more will be forthcoming in terms of the data that we've been collecting since the course has been launched as a pilot to now being in sort of the soft launch era. And this is, part of the rationale is also the assessment part of it. The dimension is very important to us. And so even though the pilot didn't yield a lot of numbers in terms of completion, what it did was assure us that we were on the right path. And then we are still collecting the data for the survey, because we think it's important to track what's actually beneficial, what's useful, and what needs to be improved as well. And to talk a little bit more about the broader strategy around assessment and the communication that we used, Robyn, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Corinne. So once we had finished the pilot, we did a bit of updates based on the pilot, and also coming back to our long timeline. The TCPS2 was updated after we had started the project. So we also at this point went in and updated that content to ensure we were reflecting and citing the most recent Tri-Council policy statement on the ethical conduct of research. Once we had done that, we worked with the National Training Expert Group of the Alliance to have peer review of the project. And that was largely because I had done most of the content and adapted some other existing content. I wanted to have more eyes on the project and really appreciated the insights from colleagues that came in through this process. So we had 4 separate reviewers who I then received kind of like a spreadsheet created from Google Forms of the comments, went through them, and then worked with PowerEd to again update the course based on that feedback we received. Once we had done that, we did more of what we called our larger internal launch of the course. So although we'd already soft launched it, once we had done some updates, PowerEd needed to do some updates on the platform related to the LMS and ensuring we don't overshoot our enrollments in the course. And so I'm just gonna advance my slide here because that is my transition right through thinking about further assessment and communications. So for this process, we're thinking about regular review, pre and post survey data and the enrollment, which we do in partnership with PowerEd. The platform is sitting with them when we need to do updates. I can do some in the files, or we can have them directly do them in this initial rounds. They've just directly been doing the updates for us, and they can pull us the enrollment data. We're also working on ensuring going forward that there will be regular communications that go out to incoming or ongoing graduate students. So for example, the FGS sends out a newsletter to students, and we can work references to this into other orientations that students get as they come into their programs. We will be connecting directly with program coordinators and teams. So our AU uses a somewhat different model for course development than other institutions might use, but we will be connecting with the teams that do some of the online course development, and to ensure that they're aware of the project and can link to it, or potentially in the future embed it into their courses itself. And then we are also reporting and coordinating with the RDM strategy implementation team at AU, which I am also on, just to kind of report back and say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're assessing it, and demonstrating how that's also moving forward, opportunities for support at our institution on RDM. So here, I did also want to ensure we touched on the importance of the possibilities for reuse with this course, because we did from the get-go want to ensure it was an adaptable and reusable course that other people could use. So on here, as Corinne mentioned earlier, we went with putting it in the LMS itself because the learning management system had real advantages for our local audience. In particular, if they know where to go, but it is also a platform that is publicly available. Anyone can create a account on it and get into the course. So that's inevitably the second option here on the slide. Anyone can use the PowerEd version. If you are an RDM contact at your institution, you can distribute that access code out to students who need to access the course. It's just, it is locked down in the sense that PowerEd didn't want to leave it totally open because there's only so many seats in the learning management system, and they didn't want it to just get spammed by internet traffic. So that's why there's a code there. But everyone who is an RDM contact free to redistribute that. It's also licensed CC by non-commercial, and I've noted on here unless otherwise noted, and that's just because we are repurposing some other content. So anything that is adapted is clearly called out in the text so that people know what the original license of the content was. If you would like to adapt the RISE files yourself, then this is the disadvantage on that from an OER perspective here is we did use a proprietary software for this because that was what we had access to and what allowed us to work most efficiently. But it is a fairly commonly used platform, and RISE has a built-in way to share files. So if you want access to the files, you can contact me and I will send them out. I'm also working on converting those files, going back to the original Word document versions that we'd had, so that I can put those up in our institutional repository for others to be able to pull down the content. It's not as readily available to implement into an LMS as the RISE files are, because those can be exported as a SCORM package out of RISE. But it is something that if people just wanted to use the content for their own purposes, I'm working on getting those more editable files up as well. So now from here, I did want to briefly touch on, and concluding here, some of our process throughout, especially since we were thinking about this as being a behind the scenes view and wanting to really highlight all the complexity of the process in developing this and getting all the support we needed. So creating an OER, a course like this at our institution, as well as working on making sure we could get it out openly, was a significant investment of time and resources. So on the slide here, I've really highlighted, we had resources, we were thinking about context and audience, both locally and also broader. How could we ensure some adaptability for other places? And a key consideration throughout, and as Corinne highlighted every time we were talking about processes, was what made sense for our institution and how could we sustain things based on our level of staffing and available infrastructure to us. So we use PowerEd because it's local, we have an ongoing agreement. They've set up a timeline with us, they reach out just to check, do we need any updates on the course? What else can we do? If something comes up before they've reached out, we can go back to them and say, hey, can we work on this? It's really useful to think about it that way. So as we were going, a lot of the things we were thinking about was, how can we make this available long-term? How can we manage updates and maintain technical infrastructure? What were our students used to interacting with and made sense for departments? And what made sense for the long-range planning and available resources for FGS as well, because they are also building up their professional development offering for students. So I just kind of to bring this back around here, really highlighting that it is a significant investment in people, in funding, in time, and in available technology to put together a resource, and then also ensure that the offering can be maintained for students long term. So I think from here, we're to the point of putting our contact information up and opening things up for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Robyn and Corinne. That was a really great overview of a really great resource that has some challenges in the execution, but you've got to a good place, it sounds like. A question we just had come in through the host and panelist chat. Just to confirm, there's no cost to students for taking this course. Is that correct?
No, and if they see a price quoted, it's really sort of the default PowerEd. They just have to type in the code graduate free, and it's going to be free for them and anyone really accessing the course.
That's
okay.
It's a LMS limitation that we have just in what the PowerEd refers to as the hard coding on their site. We couldn't change the words buy now to access now on the button.
Right.
But it is free. You just have to put that code in.
Okay. And with that code, is that something that people could make to post on a LibGuide or a web page, or should they maybe say contact someone for the code in communications about the course?
Ideally, I think it's a contact us versus a public facing site, mostly just because PowerEd has that limited seat, so they didn't want people to get spammed by anything. But yes, we put it up on our site as just contact us for the code. You can freely redistribute the code as needed, or if you're giving an RDM presentation and want to put it in the chat like we just did, please feel free.
Great. And another question that's come in, and this might not be a question for you, but one for the broader institution. Have you thought of making this course compulsory for all students, or has AU thought of making the course compulsory for all the grad students?
Well, I won't say specifically this course, but we are definitely been discussing internally making professional development course a suite and options to students compulsory, a little bit like the U of A model. We're not there yet. We have a lot of things to iron out, but it's definitely part of the conversation. What we've been doing, short of making it compulsory, because we don't have the capacity right now at this moment, but it's to think about sort of disseminating the information about the course, largely to our the supervisors, the researchers, the faculty, so they can use this as they see fit, as Robyn had mentioned, either as refer the students to go and do the standalone course, or even for some of our faculty, if they're interested, to incorporate this as part of their courses, to embed the link within their course, or a module, a specific module that they want. So we are certainly making sort of the job of communicating about the course to make it as widely available as possible. And we also have an annual event around the Graduate Student Research Conference, where graduate students also come together, and we are publicizing this course as well there. But yes, it is something that we're considering for the future, but for now it's optional.
Great, thank you. A reminder, if you have questions, please feel free to put them into the Q&A. Nick, I know you mentioned you had a couple that you wanted to throw in.
I always have questions, Jen, thanks. And so thanks you, both of you. That was an awesome talk. It's great seeing these inside baseball things for these long projects and how they came to be. I have a two-parter question, just because I am interested in bigger projects like this. What was the most challenging part for each of you respectively, and were there any surprises through this? I'm very curious to hear both of your experiences with those.
I can start. The most challenging part for me on this was anticipating the amount of time it took for content development, because I had to get the draft in so that we could do the next process on each module. And it can be hard to anticipate that based on other things coming in, depending on what the other aspects of your job are. So if there's 5 meetings in a day, or you get 5 requests from faculty and students that week when the previous few weeks you haven't seen any, that sort of thing can be a little awkward. So that being willing to think about timeline and build in a little extra time on the content development was really important there. And the editor ended up being very kindly flexible with us on that at the end as well, because the last couple of modules and getting the content together was much closer to the editing deadline than we had initially anticipated. So that was one of the key challenge for me was thinking about how to ensure we had kept the protected time that we had argued for when we did the initial proof of concept, that we were going to dedicate time to this throughout the project.
Yeah, Nick, very good question. As a practitioner, I mean, it's always the unexpected. It's unexpected, to be very frank, was the institutional context. At the time, we were in a labor negotiation and we almost went into a strike. So that impacted the project and the start of the project itself. So we were not even sure. I mean, we had done all this legwork and we're not even sure if we're actually going to be able to deliver on the project itself, because the university might have closed. And also the fact that by that time we had already contracted the external, designer to come and help us. So anticipating the good thing is, good project management strategy, contingency plan. So I was able to build in that within the contract. Very important when you work in those kind of very fluid environment these days, to have a contingency plan. And part of the contingency plan was really a paragraph saying that, okay, those are the stated, deadlines for the projects, but we need to have some flexibility and be able to stop the project and resume if, the institutional context, depending on the institutional context, which really was the labor dispute, which thankfully was resolved. But that was important it was a good thing that we had put the contingency plan in as a clause, because we really relied on that external designer to be able to actually execute on the projects beyond the proof of concept. So that was very, very key in the fact that this course was delivered. And thank God also this, again, leveraging those relationships with the other unit, the Power Ed. It's a good thing that this designer had worked on other projects, and so it kind of understood a little bit the context and was flexible enough also to accept this as part of his terms of reference. So leveraging those partnerships and sustaining them are very important too when we're a small unit. I would say that's the big ongoing challenges for any professional development course, and in particular for research data management, which kind of is new and not new. It's kind of one of those where it seems intuitive, but it's not, because of all the new policies that even experienced researchers are not aware of. So that was important to keep in balance, sort of like, okay, who are we speaking to, and how do we secure the resources to get this project going?
Great, thank you. Recognizing that we're getting to the top of the hour, or the bottom of the hour if you're in Newfoundland, probably have time for one more question. How are you promoting the course to graduate students? I know you talked a little bit about that, but
it's an ongoing thing. So we are using what I call multi-pronged strategies. Again, being part of a small but mighty unit. So internally, we have the graduate newsletter within our own faculty. We also tapped into the student union, the graduate student union, who have been formidable. I mean, we didn't put them as an official partner, but really they've been with us from the get-go. They have their own newsletter. They have their own way of accessing students in different social media channels that we don't have access to, and we don't need to. But they've been really great in terms of advertising the course. The library as well has its own network that they've been able to tap into to advertise the course. And as I mentioned, we also have a partner with Memorial University in Newfoundland. So their own staffing around professional development have been also populating this course. So this is why beyond the pilot, we are sort of collecting the data, and hopefully we'll be able to have a clearer picture. And then the research office as well is playing a role in terms of diffusing that within the network. So it's really the strategy of everybody has networks, and we're making sure that this course on a regular basis is on the radar. So we're strategic. So right now it's the summer, we're kind of like letting things go a little bit, but in the fall, we're going to have a new campaign as well to sort of popularize this course.
Yeah, and just to add in on that too, as Corinne mentioned in the fall, the library in general does orientations for some of the grad programs, and our instruction librarian who does that checks in with me to see if what we need to put on the slides. So we have the course mentioned there, hoping that students, because of course it's overwhelming at the start of a program, but if they see a mention that they may come back, or remember that they know that there are services they can come and ask about. And we do also offer other presentations later in the year where we mention the course as a resource as well, just to give our students also that maximum options of getting at information, so that they have asynchronous as well as synchronous opportunities to interact with this.
Great, thanks so much. Catherine, I think you had some words that you wanted to share to end things off today. Yes.
Excellent. So yeah, we just wanted to thank you all for joining us today, on behalf of the Alliance, on behalf of the National Training Expert Group, and of our panelists and speakers throughout the session. We really appreciate your interest in this particular resource, and in your continued interest for open educational resources. We would love to hear more from you, and so please keep your eyes out for a short email that will come out after the session, and we would really appreciate it if you were to fill in the survey attached. So just to let you know that we will be taking a short break over this summer, and we will resume planning in August, hoping to come back with our first session, or our fourth session, I guess, in September. So we're really looking forward to seeing you all here again, and in the interim, wish you all a wonderful summer. Jen and Nick, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Nothing for me. Echoing the sentiments of have a great summer, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks to Robyn and Corinne for the great presentation.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.